back at it again, and we have another one with Dinesh. Let's dive in.
A strong Thurman is a model.
No.
He's exactly the same guy as Harry Byrd was. He was the guy who used to be KKK.
No, he wasn't in the KKK. Robert Byrd. Okay. But see, this is your whole case. Your whole case rests on one guy. Can you name 5 people? Name 5 Dixiecrats who became Republicans. Name them.
They got voted out of office and they died.
Name 5 guys in the Democratic Party who became Republicans. Can you? Oh, sorry. Better now? Okay, sorry.
I submit to you that there's no way that you can compare the Dixiecrat Party of 50 or 60 years ago with the current Democratic Party just because it has the same label is meaningless. And it's absurd to make the comparison between the two.
There we go. There we go. Give my guy a mic. It was a little hard to hear at first, but apparently he tried to say the Dixiecrats switched to Republican. And then Dinesh called him out and told him to name 5, and he couldn't. Then he tried to switch the subject and say, well, it's terrible to say that the Dixiecrats and the New Age Democrats are the same. Well, if they never left, then maybe Joe?
With the current Democratic Party just because it has the same label is meaningless. And it's absurd to make the comparison between the two.
Can you compare the America of today to the America of pre-slavery?
That isn't relevant to
It is. If according to you that the analogy breaks down over 30 or 40 years, then America today surely bears no responsibility for what happened before 1865.
Well, I would submit, that I am not guilty of slavery. My ancestors may have been, but that's not the point.
But the point would be, wouldn't it, that because your ancestors did it and you might be the present-day beneficiary of previous oppression, you would at least be the upholder of some elements of privilege inherited from the past, right? Wouldn't that be?
I agree with that, and that's why I support affirmative action.
And why doesn't that apply to the Democratic Party too? That they would be the...
Because that's merely a label. The people that represented that party are dead. Long gone. They have nothing to do with the current Democratic Party. It's merely rhetorical trickery.
I mean, you know that Harry Byrd died in 2010,
so you're
right?
saying that 80% of African Americans who support the Democratic Party have no idea what they're thinking, and they're dupes by supporting the Democratic Party that used to be their enslavers. Of course they know that they were Democrats. Of course they know that. They support the Democrats now because they support their values.
No, I don't think most people know that. I don't think most people know the true history of the Democratic Party. I think if they did, it would be terrible for the left, and they would have a whole lot of explaining to do. I was never taught about the true history of that entire situation when I was young. So this is just an assumption. I don't think most people know, especially in the black community. I don't think most people know the true history. And if the true history were to be exposed and put out there, I think you'd see even more of a mass exodus than what you already see. But that's just my assumption. I could totally be wrong. Y'all can let me know how you feel about that in the comment section. Do you think most people know? And if most people found out, do you think they would just not vote? Or do you think they would vote Republican? Or do you think they would just stay? Let me know.
What they're thinking, and they're dupes by supporting the Democratic Party that used to be their enslavers. Of course they know that they were Democrats. Of course they know that. They support the Democrats now because they support their values. It's absurd to claim that the Democrats now have anything to do with the crimes that were committed many decades or centuries ago.
All right, I'll leave it at that, with only the proviso that it will take me too far afield to do full justice to what you just said. I think that, let me just tell you something that Charles Barkley, the basketball player, commented on. And he's talking about the present, not about the past.
He wants to run for governor in Alabama as a Republican.
Very interesting.
Charles Barkley is hilarious. If you've never watched the show with Charles Barkley, Shaq, Kenny Smith, and man, I'm forgetting the other guy's name, but Charles Barkley. I respect him for keeping it real. He always keep it real. That's one thing I do respect about Charles Barkley.
He goes, I've been noticing that poor people have been voting for the Democratic Party for 50 years, and they're still poor. Now, what's he getting at? I think what he's saying is that we have seen in Detroit, in St. Louis, in Baltimore, in the inner cities of this country, a kind of revival of the old, well, it's a new form of the old plantation. And what I mean by that is, if you think of the plantation as people living in complete dependency, they can't get off the plantation. Now, they get a basic provision on the plantation, but it's very meager. But nevertheless, it's enough to sustain you, and you're there and you're stuck. Now, I'm not saying that the inner city is the same. Obviously, it's not the same. People aren't being forced to work against their will, etc. In fact, a lot of them aren't working. But there is a certain kind of frozenness to the plantation. And what I notice is very bizarre and very telling is that when there are efforts to change the plantation, they are vigorously fought by progressives and Democrats. So, for example, in a lot of inner cities now, there are these gentrification movements in which yuppies come in with technology companies and they say, all right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put in all these new buildings, we're going to create all these new jobs, we're going to open Starbucks, we're going to create all this enterprise, and we're going to make this into a kind of enterprise zone of productivity and prosperity. And we're also going to pay money to the people who are in there now so they can move elsewhere or stay here. And if they stay here, there are going to be more jobs, and there's going to be better food, and we're going to clean up the place, and crime rates will go down. And progressive Democrats will inevitably mobilize and fight desperately to block these gentrification schemes. More jobs, more prosperity, less crime, safer neighborhoods. What's not to like? And if you don't, and if you have to move, your property values have gone up already enormously, and so you can sell and cash out and move where you want. But no, you have to fight these. Why? Because you can't disrupt the plantation. The plantation has its uses. So that's all I'm going to say about this now. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are different forms of exploitation. If you have figured out a way to create a political class that you depend on politically, that's delivering 90% of its votes to you, and if any of those guys got jobs and moved out, they would no longer be beholden to you, that's not a very good situation. And it bears an uncanny resemblance to the policies of the past.
So yeah, I definitely think he's speaking facts there. Keep them poor, keep them dependent upon us, we get their vote. It's similar to the plantation. We keep them poor, we keep them, we keep their wages low, we keep them uneducated, keep their schools garbage, and we keep their vote. What couldn't slaves do? They couldn't read. They weren't allowed to educate themselves. Why? Because an intelligent mind is a free mind, and a free mind is an enemy to that kind of institution. So you keep the schools terrible. Not a fan of the voucher system in terms of, parents being able to pick where they send their kids to school to. Hey, if you live in this poor area, you got to go to this garbage school. We're going to send you to a garbage school, so your education is very, very poor, and it's terrible. Like, what is the argument, genuinely? What is the argument against vouchers for schools, in terms of parents being able to pick which school their kids, go to? Because obviously once one school is filled, those kids have to go to another school. You can't overfill a school. I mean, the school can only hold so many people. I mean, there's only so many lockers that are in, these school buildings. So once you run out of lockers, there's no more room. So what is the argument against vouchers? Let me know in the comment section what some of these politicians have come up with. I'm sure it's been some elaborate scheme to make it sound horrible, but I'm just really interested to know what the argument is. But yeah, it makes sense along the lines of the plantation. Keep them uneducated, we continue to have the vote. Keep them dependent upon us. Keep these high-paying jobs out. Keep the number of jobs coming in out. So we keep them poor and dependent upon us for government assistance. So we keep their vote. in slavery. They're dependent upon us to feed them. They're dependent upon us for water. So we keep them here. So they're fed and they get something to drink. Same type of situation, obviously not exactly the same, but a similar situation. And you see some of the same stuff going on. Interesting when you really sit back and think about it. And of course, you can get deeper than that with the whole situation. But he made some great points there. Made some really fine points. It's honestly a little scary when you sit and think about it. Like, whoa, that is quite similar. Obviously not the same, not to the degree, but that is quite similar. But of course, as always, y'all let me know what you thought about this one in the comment section below. Like, share, comment, and of course, hit that subscribe button before you go. Peace and love. I'm out.